the shenanigans going on regarding immigration reform have just really given me a sick feeling. And throw into that the fact that I've had some behind-the-scenes conversations with some political types in recent days, and I'll tell you what, it is a cesspool. I think it was J.C. Watts who expressed the concern that for a lot of politicians, they go around and campaign and talk about the fact that, it's a cesspool in Washington. And then they get to Washington, and all of a sudden it's a wading pool or a hot tub. This is what unfortunately happens. Why does that happen? Well, we can go into all kinds of theories. I think one of the reasons why we see some people who are standing firm and standing strong, especially part of your South Carolina delegation, is because they're not standing alone. They are calling upon their Creator to help them in the important decisions they're making, and also to help them stand firm. They're calling for a grace that they don't have within them. They're calling for strength in addition to guidance. One of those people is 3rd District Congressman Jeff Duncan, who joins us on the program this morning. Welcome, sir.
Vince, thanks so much for having me. Good morning to you.
Well, I was intrigued by an article I came across recently that was talking about you. It was a story about prayer and the fact that there's more prayer going on in Washington, D.C. than you would think. And in this, I assume you're trying to provide some level of assurance of what's happening here. Give us some context for this.
Well, first off, I didn't know what I would find when I went to Washington. I heard the cesspool comments that you talked about earlier. Really didn't know if I'd find other believers, but I can tell you there are, and that there are a lot of guys and women that go to the Lord first for their decisions and for guidance and wisdom. I'll give you an example. We were voting on the first CR back in the spring of 2011. About 10:30 at night, Speaker Boehner called us into a big meeting room there in the Capitol to explain the compromise deal with the Senate, and afterwards the group broke up. 243 Republicans, and the South Carolina delegation sort of congregated over to one side of the room, and we're talking about it. And a buddy of mine, Steve Sutherland from Florida, came up and said, "What are you boys from South Carolina going to do on this?" And we said, "We don't know. We're just talking about it." He said, "Man, I got to go find a quiet place and reflect and pray about this." And Tim Scott, now Senator Tim Scott, said, "Why not right here?" And the five of us with a guy from Florida pulled some chairs together, and we prayed about the issue and got some discernment from God about the right direction. I'll never forget it. It was one of those moments that you will never forget in your life.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And as I understand this, your praying together did not end there.
It didn't. Fast forward to August of 2011, we had the monumental debt ceiling Budget Control Act bill, and we were called over on a Thursday evening to the Capitol, which is about a quarter of a mile from the office if you walk it. Called over there to vote, and I get over to the floor, and they say, "Congressman, that we've postponed votes for a little while." And I said, "Well, how long? 5 minutes, 30 minutes, several hours till tomorrow, what?" And they said, "We don't know." So there's a little unknown room right off the Capitol, right off the rotunda, right in the heart of the Capitol, known as the Members' Chapel. It's a small chapel, has a backlit stained glass with George Washington, actually the first Tebow. He's kneeling in prayer, but it has Psalm 16:1, "For in thee, O Lord, I put my trust." And so I go over there occasionally just for a quiet place to pray and reflect. I went over there that evening because they postponed votes, and my phone buzzed in my pocket. Mick Mulvaney texted me. He said, "Duncan, where are you?" I'm sure Mick wanted to go get something to eat. He'd come over to the Capitol and realized votes had been postponed. I said, "I'm in the chapel praying." He said, "Hold on, I'll be right there." He picks Tim Scott up with him, and they walk over there. They come in. We pray about it. I don't believe Trey made it over the Capitol yet. Maybe he got word that we were not going to vote until later. But it was Mick, myself, and Tim. And while we were praying about the debt ceiling vote, now keep in mind, we were voting on raising the nation's credit limit of the borrowing ability. We prayed about it, asked God for wisdom and discernment. And when we finished, Mulvaney reaches over and grabs a Bible off the prayer bench, and he says, "I'm going to look some scripture up." And he flips over and he goes, "Huh." And I go, "What?" He said, "Well, look," he said, "I turned to Proverbs 22:7. Look what it says." I was thinking it was a different verse, but look what it says. And Proverbs 22:7 says, "The rich will rule over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender." Oh. Now, when you're asking God for wisdom, discernment, he speaks to you through his word. You better listen. And so the borrower is servant to the lender, Proverbs 22:7.
Wow, that is absolutely awesome. And what's neat about this, too, is as you describe this, it's very clear here. This isn't just a matter of saying some sort of, obligatory prayer and, something that's going to be repeated over and over again. You're going to God, and there's two-way communication here. He's speaking to you. You guys are listening.
Absolutely. God speaks to you through His Word, through prayer and circumstances. He spoke to us through His Word there, but numerous circumstances in my walk as a congressman and walk as a Christian congressman. Confirmation with a guy like Mark Meadows from North Carolina, took the seat that Heath Shuler had in Western North Carolina when he came to Congress. Just that relationship that he and I developed. And another guy, Roger Williams from Texas, the Donkey Whisperer, a great commercial during the campaign. Google the Donkey Whisperer, and you can see Roger. Well, we got to talking, and he was saved at Self Memorial Hospital, now Self Regional, in Greenwood, South Carolina, in my district when he played for the Braves Farm Club down in Greenwood back about 1972. He shared with me that he was saved. He found the Lord and accepted Jesus into his heart in Greenwood, South Carolina, there in my district.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. I'm kind of curious. Do you continue to discover other people who are also believers who you're connecting with and praying, and kind of a greater network of people that are maybe even operating a little bit below the radar and not being as out front as you might be?
Absolutely. There's a lady named Vicki Harpler from Missouri who has tried to get a group of believers together from our freshman class and now some sophomores that are there together. And we haven't been able to find the right time. We've tried 8 o'clock in the morning, 7:30 in the morning. We've tried 5 or 5:30 in the afternoon. And listen, Satan's keeping us apart. He's not letting our schedules work out. She just wants a group of folks that can share about the concerns in their home life, being away from family, and their Christian walk in Washington, the struggle that we're facing as a nation, and have a group that can share those in private, not out front. And I will say this, everything I'm telling you is not to glorify me, it's to glorify God. So I want to be very clear about that. I'm not telling these stories for any satisfaction for myself. But Vicki tried to put this group together, and I would ask those that are listening continue to pray about that, because we have not been able to find the optimal time, and our schedules just haven't worked it out. But I think that's something that we vastly need as other believers, people I can share about my struggles with my family, being a father of 3 boys who are teenage years, one going off to college this year, as I struggle being apart from them.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot, and this is a reminder for us, and I think you would so appreciate this, Jeff Duncan, the importance of us lifting you guys up in prayer, because you are, I've talked about this on a regular basis. There's a sense in which you guys are especially under assault spiritually, because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out Washington, D.C. is a dark place. You want to talk about principalities and powers and the influence and control over that city and what's going on. You guys have to go armed.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And that prayer is so special to be lifted up that way. You know, I joke that sometimes my feet don't feel like they're touching the ground because I know folks back home are lifting us up. But there's a story in Nehemiah where the folks were rebuilding the wall that's been torn down. They were looking at the rubble they had to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem with. I think about our country, you know, the rubble that we have become and how we have to try to rebuild this nation. And Nehemiah didn't allow those folks to stand out there alone. He knew they were going to be sniped at by the enemy and that they needed assistance. So he put someone out there to hold the sword or the shield or the spear or the coat of armor. And I see that as folks back home. I'm doing the work of trying to rebuild this nation in the form that I campaign on and I believe in, but I'm not alone. I know that the spiritual warriors are back home lifting us up, and I point directly to the book of Nehemiah. I think it's 4 verses 10 through 20 where he talks about that.
We're having a conversation with Jeff Duncan about prayer and the effort to stand firm in Washington, D.C. It's kind of interesting. I had a conversation just a few days ago with a gentleman who is, I believe, running for Senate. And we had a great conversation. One of the things he said is that I want to go to Washington, D.C. I look at it as a missionary assignment. Is this kind of a perspective that you and some of your colleagues have as well? You're going as lights in a pretty dark place.
Well, I don't know if I've ever used the term missionary, but I do know that God was at the formation of this country. He was with our our founding fathers. He divinely inspired them. If you look at the three branches of government, you think of the Trinity. There's just a lot of different things that we know our founders were believers, and they prayed for hours before they got started there at the Constitutional Convention. And it was Ben Franklin, an agnostic really, that recommended that, by the way. But so I don't know if I look at it that way, but I do know that our nation needs to turn back to God, and that God needs to shine his face on our nation once again. He's not going to do that until believers start really focusing on that and praying about that return. I would invite folks, Vince, to come. I've got a Faith and Freedom barbecue coming up on the 26th of August over the Anderson Civic Center. I've got Senator Rand Paul coming, Senator Tim Scott coming as well. I hope Mark Meadows and a buddy of mine from Louisiana, Jeff Landry, former member of Congress, will come and speak as well and give their perspectives. But you can find details about that. It is a paid event, JeffDuncan.com. Just help cover our costs, but JeffDuncan.com will give you everything that you need to know about that. I'd love to see you.
Well, certainly, and in fact, when I talked with your office about this, they wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity to mention this, that this is coming up on the 26th, and, if possible, I'd love to come and check this out as well. May very well try to do that if the schedule permits. But Congressman Jeff Duncan, we so appreciate what you do in Washington, D.C., and appreciate you coming on the program as well.
Well, Vince, thanks for having me this morning to talk about this subject that's dear and near to my heart. And I, as I always say to Russ and everyone else I talk to, may God continue to bless you, and God bless America.
All right. Thank you, sir. Jeff Duncan, Congressman representing the 3rd District of South Carolina.